Hi guys, Kian here. So it's been quite a while since I made an update video about my art progress in general. It's been more than a month, I think, since I even last filmed, let alone the last update video about how the art process in general is going, the creation process, whatever you want to call it. There's two main things I think that, there's two main pieces of work that I guess characterize this period, and one main medium. So the main medium that I've even really worked on is kind of like writing poems. I wrote a few snippets of poems that didn't quite make it to even putting up on shorts as a somewhat complete thing. Only one made it, and it's called Bodies in Spacetime. It went through 4 or 5 iterations before I landed on the one that I published. So that's one of the works that I kind of made during this period. The other one is technically a playlist. I don't know whether I would make a video talking about why I chose all of the songs the same way that I did for the other mixtape about being disillusioned by work. This one I may just post the image of it and link the mixtape / playlist. And I'll talk a bit more about why. But first I want to talk about the period. So like I said, it's been more than a month. And the reason why it's been so long is since an update at all is just because I don't know whether you can hear, but there's like a bunch of background sounds because it's at night in the house. But anyway, I've not really made anything, which I suppose is probably not too far off from the previous update if I remember correctly. I think I was talking about how sometimes it's time to take in input instead of create output, and I've really been trying to let that experiment run, allow myself to not feel like I have to force myself to make something just because it feels like it's about time, which kind of is a conditioning of the productive, efficient society that we live in. And it's not easy, I guess, to sit in that discomfort, and a lot of it looks like nothing's happening, and a lot of it looks like there's nothing to show for it, which always feels a bit unsettling, I think, because it's so unfamiliar to how I am used to the idea of like work, creation, productivity, doing anything at all versus just like not doing, like resting, or like maybe not resting, but like, you know, the way there's a period of growth before there's harvest in like agriculture. It looks like nothing much is happening, and it feels very uncomfortable and very unfamiliar, and it's been going on for like, if we count the previous update as well, I guess it's been more than 1 month, 2, maybe 3, and therefore it's very deeply uncomfortable. And then so I've mostly been trying to just I've been inclined to read, so I've been reading, and I'm not gonna talk about what I've read, but like, I mean, like, it's not really the main point of today's video, but I read a bunch of stuff. Kind of fell back into the way I used to in school holidays, where I would just wake up, read, eat, eat some more, read, sleep, repeat, things like that. Like, I remember being a kid just finishing like a novel this thick maybe in like one day. It's kind of what I'm doing, or what I was doing. And in between, like I said, I wrote a few snippets of some poems, and then I finished the one that is Bodies in Spacetime. So that's the one I'm going to talk about. But before that, I'm going to talk a bit about poems. I think the thing that puzzled me the most is why in this period of seemingly nothing much happening on the surface, although I suspect stuff's happening below the surface, is really like what is happening. Why am I writing poems? I don't even really like poems. I don't know whether it's obvious, but I've never been a fan of poems. I would find them, I guess, difficult to read and like not particularly fun, and it always makes me feel like I'm second guessing myself, trying to figure out what's going on. And apparently that's not what you're supposed to do when you read poems. Because anytime there's something I don't understand, I try to figure out what's happening. So I have been trying to read poems, trying to figure out why, or not read poems. I've been trying to both read poems and also listen to other people's accounts of like why read a poem, or like how to read a poem to enjoy it, and trying to figure out like what am I doing that makes me dislike poems so much, and at the same time strangely feel compelled to write them. And I still don't really have an answer. I think the best that I can think of is what Ocean Vuong, I don't know if that's how you pronounce his surname, talked about how writing kind of splits into two main types. One being writing a bit more like painting, and the other one being writing a bit more like how a newspaper would, which is more informational. And poems tend to fall in the category of writing like you would a painting. You're doing it more to express an emotion, a point of view, a feeling, a state, an observation, rather than like merely trying to convey some form of information across. And so I think the thing that I took away from this exploration in general was just, I think, I might be wrong, but I think a poem is meant to be a bit more about allowing yourself to look at stuff through the lens that you already wear. And I think it's difficult for me because I come from a culture, and I just mean this in general, like the time of things being like a bit more biased towards writing things in an informational manner. And also maybe it's some slight neurodivergence in which I prefer things to be stated a bit more plainly and without that inherent lens. And what I mean by that is, like, for example, if a poem is about feeling sad, I think I inherently try to read the poem as like, okay, you want to convey that you're sad, and I kind of skip over the way the words are written to kind of invoke that sense of sadness in your body or whatever it's supposed to do. That more somatic experience of that poem and the more somatic conveyance of the sadness rather than the more informational and therefore intellectual one. I think I tend towards the more intellectual interpretation of it, just, out of habit or conditioning or whatever it is. Like, it comes more easily to me that way, and therefore the other way feels a bit difficult. And also because I think I guess have been brought up in a way where I'm often made to think about my own biases, and I try very hard, again coming back to the informational thing, like I think there is a lot of this idea of trying not to put your bias into the information that you're conveying. And I think I inherently hold some sort of like notion that there is a superiority in being able to take that bias, that point of view, that subjective experience of that information out of the thing and just convey the information. And I think writing poems and weirdly being compelled to do so, even though I don't find myself particularly enjoying the medium, has made me have to look at this tendency and be like, if we take the notion of good and bad, superior or inferior, or like desired in this current time or not out of it, like whether informational is better or that conveyance of emotion is better, if we just take it out of it and just treat it as like I'm trying to train a skill that I am just not used to, not good at, to go against the tendency of how I would normally write by forcing-ish sort of myself to write in poems. I'm not forcing, bear in mind, because I think that's important. I'm really trying to just do what I feel compelled to do, and it frustrates me to know and that what I'm being compelled to do is to write poems, a medium in which I don't really understand and don't really particularly enjoy. And anyway, I thought the actual poem itself that I wrote is maybe a good way to illustrate my thought process and potential takeaway of it, I guess. So like I said, the poem that I wrote, Bodies in Spacetime, went through about 4 or 5 iterations. It started much earlier, I think potentially at the start of the year. And the way I write is not fixed. Sometimes I write in a notebook, sometimes I write on the computer, but what generally happens is that once I put it into the computer, just so that I have an easier reference, I do tend to write kind of like a author's notes thing after the poem to examine myself. Like I said, I tend to approach things from a more informational perspective, and so when I look at what I have written, I guess I'm kind of looking at it in a way of like, what am I trying to say, or like, what is this lens that I cannot see? It's kind of like if all along I've been trying to like convey the world as it is, like this, because I'm told that it's bad to talk about stuff from this lens. And writing poems is kind of me being used to being kind of this way, and then being told that like, no, you should actually like write like this from your lens. And I think my author's notes is still me kind of clutching on to a bit of the informational thing, in which I'm trying to figure out by looking at the thing that I have done, what is this lens that I have inadvertently put onto my poem just by trying to express things as I feel them. And I would say the first iteration, and maybe I think the third or fourth iteration of the poem was probably the most revealing in terms of what it revealed to me about myself. So the first one was, the first iteration just mainly came from the idea that people always criticize my words for being vague, saying that the way I talk about stuff is imprecise, and I was trying to understand that and why I feel attacked by it in a way. And then after I wrote it, and I'm gonna put a screenshot of whatever it is, I think the main thing that I took away from it is I wrote about a few different things in it actually. You can read my notes, but anyway, so I decided to separate the two different topics and focus on only one. The second iteration of it was me trying to be a bit more like, oh, I guess poems are meant to be more about imagery, let's try that. And I don't think it's particularly successful. I didn't like it, but anyway, I tried it. I wrote, I think, a few iterations of it, didn't really like it, left it. I believe the third or the fourth one is the one where I kind of came at it from not just words being imprecise, not just lines in the way that I draw being imprecise, but also the way I drew lines in architecture school and how that was also often criticized. So I brought that in, and I think that I don't really like the poem necessarily in and of itself. I don't think it's particularly good or anything, but I think it revealed a lot where somewhere along the way I think you can see I realized that the reason why I write the way I do is because I'm basically trying to find a new path, right? Like, it's exploratory, and therefore it's not gonna be straightforward or precise or whatever, because I don't really know where the destination is. And then when it came to the kind of what almost looks like the last form of it, in which compared to the final one is just minor tweaks, it's titled Before Celestial Mechanics, because I think I was talking so much about bodies in space, rockets, probes, whatever in space, that it felt like I was talking about orbital motion. But I think I was really trying to express that it's when the rocks haven't really come into fixed orbital motions, and therefore I called it Before Celestial Mechanics. But with, I don't know, more time of thinking about it, felt like it was really less about the rocks and just about how I'm living as, you know, a physical body in this space and in this time. And therefore that's the title. So, I mean, I think the main-ish message of the poem is probably the same. And I think the thing that I took away from it is, I think my creation, and this will tie in with the mixtape as well, I think a lot of times I create as an exploration of trying to figure out myself. But that creation is also not just a timestamp, but a way for me to remember whatever I've learned and remember how I was in that moment. Remember that revelation or that that process, that thinking that I went through. And like, I'm not a person I'm not great at memorization or like memory necessarily. I remember certain stuff and I forget certain stuff, which is probably normal. And I think the way to kind of counter that is like making something more significant by creating a thing, whether it's just a video, a note, a drawing. Somehow the act of creation, having spent that time to do the thing and also having a final thing for you to look at and to look back upon, makes it easier for me to remember whatever it is that I was thinking about or reflecting on or feeling or whatever. At that point in time, it's easier to look back on that creation that I've made and be like, okay, I remember this spot in time, which is maybe what poems are supposed to be about. I don't know, but like, I'm just generalizing it in overall to like creation, because I think that's how I feel about all of the different mediums that I kind of make stuff in. So that's about the poem. Then about the mixtape, I sat on the mixtape for a while. It's been like 90% about the same songs for maybe 2 months, and then like maybe 1 or 2 weeks before I did the cover image and listed all the tracks in order properly to kind of like finalize that this is the version of the mixtape that I want, that it's like sort of like done at this stage, like I'm not gonna tweak it anymore. I added in the last song, which is Columbia by Oasis. Anyway, not really gonna go too much into the songs necessarily, but I feel like the process of me making that mixtape, it's titled But I'm an Artist, and it's been me trying to sit on this, whatever I mentioned earlier about not making stuff, but feeling like I have the identity as an artist, but feeling a bit disconnected with the idea of like, if I'm an artist, why am I not making things? Which is kind of funny, because actually if you think about it, an identity is something that you just kind of am, like you are embodied in it regardless of whether you do the thing or not. Like, I am human, I don't need to do anything necessarily to be like I am human. I already am. I don't need to do anything to be it. And so I think that's something that I was really trying to become more comfortable with in terms of like being an artist. Like, I already am an artist, even though I'm not always actively doing something about it. I'm not necessarily always making art, but the identity of being an artist is, there. Like, I don't need to prove that I am. I already am, even though it is so tempting to be like, but I'm not if I'm not doing things, but I already am. So that playlist was me trying to come to terms with that feeling, but also sit with it and process it. And the way I like to use songs has always been to have the song kind of embody a certain feeling that I tend to feel, and using that song as kind of anchor for me to sit through the thing. And of course it's helpful to have another person's perspective on it. And so that's how the playlist has been mostly constructed. And it started off like, maybe I had about half the songs, and then towards the back from like Caravan onwards, I don't know, it's like a story that's ups and downs. And I think the thing that really tied it together for me is I listened to a playlist a lot during this, probably since the previous update about making art, so probably 2-3 months, and I listened to it while it was the mixtape was not in exactly this order, and then it became this order, but missing the last song, which is Oasis, Columbia, the mono valley version, I think. I kept listening to it and try, like, every time I listen to it, I get similar but slightly different vantage point into the feeling and how I felt about the whole thing. And sometimes I saw different connections between the songs, sometimes I saw different phases in groupings of songs because of how I decided to arrange them. And the thing that really brought it together, and I think the thing that I find important about why I call this mixtape a creation of sorts, is sitting down to try and put that mixtape into a visual representation in the form of that cover. I'll just put it here. It's messy, which is kind of how I feel about being an artist. I drew an image actually when I was listening on one of the runs in which I was listening to the song. Not an actual run, it's on one of the occasions where I was listening to the song. I had my sketchbook open and I was trying to put in all the images that the songs had or the videos had, and then trying to see whether there's overlaps. I'll put in the drawing that I did, and I thought I would use that as the base for the cover image, but in the end I did not. I used a different drawing, which is of a fig, and that was done like much earlier without the intention of ever being related to this mixtape. The idea of the fig drawing is actually more like I see people screaming in the figs. I don't know why, but when I look at the little things inside the figs, they always look like people doing this, you know, the scream. So they look like this is the bulbish bit, and this is the like this arm and like hand bit looks like the little dangly things in figs. I don't know, I just mostly look at them. I see images of people screaming inside figs, is how I put it. And that's what I was trying to draw, but it turned out to be quite difficult. I drew a few iterations of figs and I don't think any of them particularly came across as that notion of I see people screaming in figs. Like, I mean, it's probably a skill issue, which is fine. Like, I'm coming to accept that even if I am an artist, like identity-wise, it doesn't mean I have to be good skill-wise as an artist, because that's a separate thing. And maybe I don't have to be good, like I don't need to be good to be valid as an artist. But anyway, I drew a few iterations of this screaming people fig things, which I'll put here. So the image that I used for the mixtape is just one of it, and it was actually one where I got very frustrated drawing it, because I started with the black ink, and then it's not ink, sorry, it's pen, but I was quite ink. I started with the black pen drawing. There was already pencil tracing underneath it. Then I left the tracing, I tried inking it in red with some yellow for colour. Didn't like that either. By this point the fig was kind of like fragmented looking, so I was just like, you know what, I have so much fig to fill, I'm just gonna use pastels to do it. And I did pastels, and that's how you end up with that like very messy different bits fit together kind of fig. But when I was flipping through my sketchbook to look at the drawing that I originally made for the mixtape and thinking whether I should just use it, I thought the fig actually might work better, so that's what I did. And then in terms of the text, I was originally just gonna put the text for the songs in it, but like color wise it wasn't enough. Like the image of the fig was sticking out, it felt too heavy compared to the words, so I added that black rectangle thing to kind of make it give it a bit more weight of the words relative to the image. But then doing all of 14 songs with the black rectangle behind would have felt too heavy, and so I decided to I see it as a bit of like a happy accident, but like just like turn the intensity way down. It's like a very minor happy accident of being like, I guess since I need that visual weight of rectangles to kind of balance that colour in all the fig drawings, I'll highlight a few songs. And in doing so, I think it made it clearer how I segmented this playlist as phases, like I said. The songs that are highlighted in a way, like with the black rectangle, it's not like they're all like the most important song in that phase necessarily, but I do think they help to segment stuff. And I think like compared to the previous mixtape image, which I put here, where the song titles are written kind of all left aligning in some form of order, even though the text is tilted. I don't know why, but I felt like I should make the text kind of just like, like here, there, everywhere, in some form of order. It was, in a circle, because that's how the fig was drawn. Yeah. I don't know whether this sounds any coherent when you listen to it, but what I mean to say is that the drawing of the fig informed the way I decided to lay out the songs, and also the visual weight of the colours of the fig kind of inform how heavy I felt like the song titles and artist name should be. And in doing so, to try and achieve visual balance, I kind of ended up putting some importance on certain songs which kind of mesh up with how I like the thinking I had behind why I put certain songs in certain order and why they kind of break stuff up. And that kind of disorderly position, like how close the songs are clustered to each other, is kind of a bit of that thinking of like these are grouped together for me in a way, and then some of the other songs are grouped together in another way, and that there's distance between them, but in the end they all kind of go around and form the same narrative. And I thought it was important for me that they go back around, because that's how I treat the playlist. I listen to it I don't listen to it in full all the time, because it depends on what phase of the artist's cycle I'm in. The front part of it is a lot of confusion, a lot of doubt. Then that sort of descends into unhelpful doubt. And then there's a bit of like a pullback of like wait, maybe there's something that we can work with. And then it brings over to a kind of like some form of illusion, but not in a way where illusion is bad necessarily. And then I really like OK Go's Love, Willow's Symptom of Life, as kind of the end bits of that mixtape, because I feel like that feels like how ideally I want to feel about making stuff, making art. But the reason why, and there was a long time in which those were the end songs of the mixtape, but then the reason why I added Columbia, and it's not the final version of Columbia, but an earlier version that was deemed like not good enough. The reason why I added that, one, because I think the version suits the way it flows over from Symptom of Life better. The original Columbia would have been too loud, so it would not fit the playlist. But I think putting it in there also kind of serves as a reminder. Like, it's not even my own personal favorite version of Columbia, but I think it fits because it's an earlier version. You can hear what it's trying to be, but what it has not become, and you know what it can become because you have the final version of Columbia on the original, definitely maybe release. You can hear that there's a difference, especially in the chorus, I think, and also all the extra frills. But you can hear that the main structure of the song is there. It's trying to be something, but it hasn't quite reached it there. But like, you can see the potential and you're trying to work with it. You're not like giving it up just because it's not there yet. And I think that's what I want to use to encourage myself about where I'm at. And also kind of that, like, you can always deem something to be good enough to be released and like set out into the world as like, okay, yeah, this is a creation. It's maybe like not perfect, not the best that you imagine it to be, but it's like good enough, decent enough, out you go. And then maybe later you can tackle it again at another time. And that's kind of how I feel about that version of Columbia and how I'm feeling about my work in general, without trying to become too perfectionistic about any kind of art or creation I'm making. trying to be like, this is decent enough. Like, Bodies in Spacetime, can I keep editing and editing it? Yes. The last version of it, I've edited and edited until, like, if you see the different iterations, they look about the same, and by that time I was just like, it's like, just cut it loose, it's fine. It will do whatever it's meant to do outside my computer, my scope, my little bubble. Just let it out. And yeah, so I guess I really needed to make this update, not in a sense of like I did anything necessarily. On one hand, I'm very tempted to just like put the two things that I made, which is the poem and the mixtape image, and just be like, there, look at it, like, can you see how I'm feeling? But at the same time, I think there is still the value of me seeing this on camera, because like I said, I don't think I'm there yet in terms of my art, which is a skill issue, and it's also something that I'm trying not to be too fast about, because I think the more fast I am about trying to make the art good, the more I'm just gonna like straight up like not do anything at all. So if I need to do videos like this to remind myself of all the things that I didn't quite fully capture in the final thing, then like, so be it, I guess. But also like, I feel like I didn't quite keep the promise I made to myself of making regular updates about my art, and I'm trying to do that, so that's why this video is here. Anyway, that's it for this update. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.